So, hello everybody, and welcome to CX Today. I'm Floyd, one of the technology journalists here, and I'm really excited to be talking all things CX and AI, which probably comes as a little surprise to our audience these days. But more specifically, I'm joined on the call by PolyAI to talk about CX over the phone. So, welcome, Nicola. Glad to have you on the platform today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Looking forward to getting straight into it. So, the best place to start with all of these conversations is if you can just give us an introduction to yourself and Poly AI, kind of your mission statement. What's the core thing that you guys do?
Yeah, look, we build voice agents for customer service, and our goal is to prove to the world that AI can do the work of thousands of people on behalf of the world's largest enterprises and do it really, really well, right? So that they become the best version of themselves in every customer interaction, like call, chat, whatever. We're famous for building incredibly high quality voice agents, which are often indistinguishable from human agents and helping companies just provide incredible service by picking up anytime, day or night, no matter if 1,000 people are calling at once or a single person. And um, a really high level of understanding, really high fidelity voices, and overall a really smooth, elegant interaction between the caller and the automated system.
Yeah, definitely. And we do have a demo to show later on in the video, so I'm sure everyone will stick around to watch that. So yeah, we when I played it off air, I did take a bit of time to realize which one was the voice agent. So yeah, I guess that's a that's a testament to everything that you've spoken about. But I think one of the biggest topics that we should kind of cover in this conversation is how you guys differentiate from other AI solutions. In the sector, because a lot of enterprises that are looking to get voice agents, it's a minefield. That there's tons of companies out there. So it'd be great if you could talk us through how you guys kind of differentiate in the sector.
Yeah, look, there's a lot out there, and there will just be more and more, right? It's a fun space that's really exploded over the past few years. Um, I think for us, I started this company 7 years ago as a spin-out from the University of Cambridge, where I did a PhD on using deep learning for language understanding in conversational systems. My two co-founders worked on dialogue management and response generation. So kind of like between the three of us, the full system. And we were really lucky in that we worked on this when deep learning was in its infancy, right? It was very new. And we were fortunate to work with our supervisor, Steve Young, who was the father of the field in many ways. And when you look at the landscape right now, I mean, what's the last good experience you've had with an automated agent?
Yeah,
Top of mind?
yeah, not that great, I guess. It's hard to think. You can't think off the top of your head.
Right, but you've got a podcast called CX. So if there was one, you'd probably remember, right?
Yeah.
And I think in that lies half of the answer, which is there's not much out there. Really, there isn't much. We don't have a lot of competitors. And, mostly when we go up to the wire with, we work with very large companies, think the likes of FedEx, PG&E, the largest utility company in California. We work with large banks like Unicredit, with insurance companies like Allstate. So the very largest, those that have the most to gain from building and tailoring an AI system to interact with their customers. We work with Marriott, with Caesars, with a lot of hospitality groups to help them have a better experience. And I think rather than getting all technical and telling people what our differentiators are, which there are many, and we can dig in if you want, um, I think the proof is in the pudding. Where like if companies that really care about their experience, are using this kind of software, that to me has always been our phase one. Like, can we prove that Caesar's Palace will deploy this, right? If they're willing to deploy it, it means it's good. It's not there to be cost cutting for a telco, because that kind of IVR and deflection is already there, right?
Mhm.
Economics dictated that they have to implement it, right? Or whatever, they decided they have to. Um, for those companies that would not deploy these things, that's where we kind of come into play, where that's why we push the envelope so much in terms of being human-like, in terms of really getting better CSAT scores than what they're currently able to do with their contact center. Not because AI is better than humans. For the most part, it's not. It is better at some things, it's worse at others. But when you have a complex contact center, when you weave it together and apply both in the right places, then you get a much better contact center, right? Because for banks, we're able to take people through Apple Pay setup very patiently and diligently in a way that, frankly, if you're a human agent who has to take a certain number of phone calls per day, you might get a bit impatient. It might get the better of you because it's 12% of all calls. It gets really repetitive and boring. And the AI can do it really well, and it should. And it's patient, and it's cheaper for the company, and in many ways a better experience for the caller because it's not like, I'm going to send you a link, why don't you read it and see how. No, no, no. It's going to be there waiting to answer a question for step 4, right? So yeah, there's no simple answer. I think that we've been at it for a while, and we've scaled, a number of systems now that do the work of 1,000 people, often in different languages and different use cases. So we tend to be very frank with our prospects around, does it make sense for you to do this? How much is there to gain? Like, this is not an out of the box works for everyone. If it was, you wouldn't struggle to name a good experience you've had, right? So I think it's important to have that dose of realism and just know that it's coming. It'll be here very soon. It's not here at scale yet. And there's many a way to squander money and effort by doing it with the wrong vendor. Right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's come at a really vital time because I think if we look at kind of like online AI chatbots, when people are like logging on to their online bank, there's people that will use it and be happy with using it, but there's also people that just want to speak to a human. So I guess when we move across to kind of like AI over the phone, if you like, but it sounds so human-like and it can be quite empathetic. I think it just destroys the barrier to entry for AI and maybe for enterprises that are seeing this balance between end users' experience with AI and perception. So I guess for you guys, it can really help tackle this perception.
Look, I think we, like the field as a whole, needs to win that trust of the caller, where maybe people can't tell immediately whether it's human or not. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and the trust the case further, right? And for the most part, people don't expect this to work, right? So you're winning that trust interaction by interaction by managing to do something that people, by and large, think is impossible to do with AI. So because of that, what are the tailwinds, headwinds? There's a lot of good right now because the capabilities of these models have expanded to the point where we can do far more complicated tasks, and then executives, CIOs are giving us the chance by committing effort and work on their end to build out their backend integrations and things that the system needs to do the work comparable to that of a human. So it is a good time. It is a really good time for this kind of stuff because the more case studies we get, the more willing others are to try it out as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing, just to stick on the excitement around AI at the moment, I think it's exploded over the last few years. But one of the exciting things are that like a lot of the solutions, Poly AI included, are like really good and really effective. But we're just at the beginning of this journey. Things are only going to evolve even further from here. So I guess a question within that is like, where do you see the pathway of AI, over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, AI as a whole or AI in the space?
In this space.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we'll do a lot to automate the tier one support agent, right? Barring catastrophic technical integration barriers, in 5 years' time, 90% of this work should be done by AI. Now, the second phase that happens in parallel is that the subject matter experts in the contact center are about to have their job rewritten, right? They're not going anywhere, right? So when you think of that attrition, it's really the kind of like temp hire, the staying there for like 4 or 6 months. There will be less of that, right? And that won't be a problem for enterprises because that work will be done by an automated system. Now, there will be people in the back end who will be evaluating and monitoring the performance of these systems, much like they do with real human agents right now. And those guys, tier two agents, they'll always be there for escalations, so kind of like as tier two agents, and then as QA agents. And that whole effort then becomes a whole new kind of like coaching job for AI and for humans in places where you can't automate, right? And there will be places where automation won't follow quickly. There's a lot of regulation, there's uncertainty over national and continent-wide regulation with the EU AI Act and just what it will mean for the general appetite of enterprises to do it right. Um, And then the third layer that I am most excited about is the transformation of a contact center into a command center, where, you know, you know what a contact center looks like. It's like volumes, like waiting times, abandon percentages, stuff like that, first call resolution. Um, and sometimes, some days are bad days, and you don't really know why they're bad days. Maybe in retrospect, you piece it together and you're like, oh, did you have 7 calls about, I don't know, like billing issues in the north? Okay. Like, if you have an AI hive mind, that is like that first layer, then that alert should be hitting 10 minutes after it starts happening at scale. It's like, hey, we have 70 times the number of billing calls that we had yesterday. 10 minutes later, it's like they're only coming from map. You're like,
Mm.
okay. Like at that point, there's a call back to ops and like, hey, check this for me, right? Oh yeah, we did. Okay. Change the knowledge base immediately to say we're aware of billing issues in the north. We're really sorry. We'll be sending out communications next. Please, outbound calls automatically to everyone who's been impacted. Text message to everyone, right?
Mm.
And at that point, the calls stop, right? And the blood pressure goes back to normal, and you don't have a spike in calls. Because at the moment, the contact center is just badly beaten up. It's always blamed for these things. It's like, hey, why are you not like dealing with calls fast enough today? The question is not what did we do to get increased call volumes. It's almost like a priori people assume that the contact center is like not doing something well. It's always perceived as this like bottomless pit where you pour money into it and you get nothing back, and often you get a lot back, right? And you have to provide, this is the final escalation of your service, right? As a company, no matter which service you provide, you might be providing internet or electricity or you know products that you send from a website, right? But like it's your job to pick up these phone calls and to deal with this escalation. So um, it is a way to basically quantify the value of these things and to just connect the business to its customers a whole lot better.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And just switching it back on to AI over the phone a little bit more. So when choosing an AI approach, what do you think leaders should consider when in this field of AI? Because there's loads of other avenues people could go down. What would you say are the biggest things people should think about?
Yeah, yeah. I think that AI is such a big and a monumental thing that a lot of people can't really resist mounting these large offensives, right? And to follow the military analogy there, what they really need is a lot of probing attacks on different front lines, right? Um, where inevitably these days, like the challenge we face with some companies is that large cloud providers or CCaaS vendors will tell them, hey, why don't you start with agent assist, something that will help the human agent, and then later that will turn into automation. It doesn't really. It's a different problem because that problem is intimately tied to the graphical user interface and how, like, what the agent screen looks like. And that thing is always a mess. There's a lot of tribal knowledge. It's really hard to like think of a standardized way. There is no standardized, you know, screen, right? As much as people try. So then solving it is very specific, and you might shave off 10 seconds of average handling time, and that's a good thing, right? Or you might get better call summaries, or there's no reason not to do it, right? But it is important to know that it will not lead to that 90% automated future because you're building a new channel when you start building that voice agent or a chatbot. But I think with chat, what people have realized is that it's not really like there was this like narrative that young people don't want to call and old people do. And that's like factually incorrect. In fact, Gen Z like flips from millennials and has like a preference towards voice that's much higher than millennials. Millennials, like me, are like we grew up with like a keyboard and a laptop, right? We're pretty good at blurting out a lot of text. So if you're gonna, and by the way, not even millennials prefer like web chat over the phone, right? Um, so if you're willing to sit in front of a keyboard and type it out, then you can be served with chat. It doesn't mean you prefer it, right? And I
Mm.
think that was like the fallacy. So COVID largely debunked that because if there was ever a time that chat was going to take off and win, it was then, right? When everything
Hmm.
was out. It didn't, and I think that's not widely understood by people. Now, when you build a voice channel with an automated thing, It's kind of like building a website for, I don't know, buying airplane tickets once upon a time before it existed, right? It's a daunting task. It's like, do you have all the systems? You're going to have to change customer behavior. You're going to have to believe that it's safe and even preferable to go online and buy a ticket. So what are you going to, you're going to sell like, I don't know, London, New York first, right?
Hmm.
Then like 2 years later, you're going to add the multi-city functionality where I want to do London, New York, SF, London, right? And more. And, for some things you still have to call, right? If you want to get a seat for an infant in BA, you have to call, right? They could program that and add it to the website. I guess they just determined that it's not a priority or that the cost doesn't justify the benefit of me not calling, right? Um, so similarly with a voice agent, you have to like start building, right? And that involves like a complex, combined arms maneuver between the contact center and the IT department and potentially a third-party vendor, right? Now we're in a world where the cloud providers have their own solutions for like everything, right? Or almost everything in the case of all three. Then you have the CCaaS vendors that are trying to sell you AI as well. Um, and there, I think you have to be smart about it, right? You have to follow the money. Like they all have ulterior motives. For the cloud provider, they just don't want you to work with others because they want all your IT spend to go with them, and that's the directive that the account manager has when dealing with you, right? For the CCaaS provider, they're selling you licenses for the numbers of seats. So if you think they're going to sell you AI that automates half of those, well, they might, but that's not really happening in practice. At the moment, they have very convoluted pricing models that um, are there to not really impact their per seat revenue while giving you a bit of AI, maybe a slightly better IVR, or it's there to kind of like tick that box because a lot of the boards are turning around and the contact center has emerged as probably the number one application for artificial intelligence. So a lot of people are just trying to tick the box wherever they can, and no one ever got fired for buying IBM or Google, right?
Hmm.
So you can tick the box that way. You're not going to achieve a lot. So if you have a genuine problem and you are willing to do work and be one of the pioneers, because you see it from the number of really good deployments, the people doing this with us are still the early adopters and the pioneers. And there's way more and more of them, and it's slowly going into the mainstream now, so that's really good. But I think that for the most part, large enterprises are better served piloting things with many, including with large cloud providers and CCaaS, and seeing what works best for them. Right? I'm not saying that a startup will always be better, but there are cases in which you have to decide whether you're buying at the application layer or the platform layer, right? And there are companies doing everything from buying at the application layer from us to kind of like building at the platform layer with, say, a Google, right, or with a CCaaS platform. Then you have very IT savvy companies that can't resist the urge to play with this themselves. They go below the platform layer. They're working with models directly, and they're just trying to first build an agent. They build it, and it's never been easier to build an okay demo, but the technology is so powerful that it's kind of like, I don't know, a supercar that goes from 0 to 60 in like 2 seconds, right?
Hmm.
Like, yeah, it's really easy to go from 0 to 60. It's also really easy to, kill yourself accidentally. So hallucinations, safety, integrations that make sense that don't lead to potentially catastrophic experiences. Like, LLMs are a very, very sharp knife, and you have to be careful.
Yeah, definitely, and that's quite a good segue onto the next topic that we wanted to talk about, really, and that is all about hallucinations. Because I think sometimes hallucinations is attached to AI, in the discourse, but that's not always the case, especially because it's like more specifically on the LLM side. So I guess it's quite important to kind of break that conception as well, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I think that these models are very powerful and they store a lot of information in themselves even before you've configured it for your application, right? So I remember one of the first prototypes we fully ported to an LLM was a Gaylord property, a Marriott hotel in Orlando, Florida. And I started talking to the system about the history of the hotel. And it knew everything, right? They knew where it was founded, what it was famous for. I'm like, wow. I was like, did we provide that info? We did not provide that info, right? So strictly speaking, that's a hallucination, right? It goes outside of the scope of what I had like defined. So since then, we've been like able to kind of like constrain the behavior of LLMs and to use them in places where it makes the most sense, right, to drive the conversation. And then you use what's known as RAG, retrieval augmented generation, to kind of like pick out the most pertinent information so that as the LLM, much like you or I would for a domain we're not super familiar with, if we need an answer to a question, we would just basically go and say, hey, um, these are the 3 relevant facts, read them and then answer the question. And by and large, if you have the right stuff in there, you're not really going to see a hallucination that you're going to be not okay with. Now, you might see a hallucination, and a lot of people misattribute them. They call them hallucinations when it's just really the wrong answer. And for the most part, it's the wrong answer because there's a lack of clarity in like the supporting knowledge bases, or maybe even like contradicting information, where it's your job to then be very explicit, right? And what's happening right now with humans, right? Because you'll mostly create this using like training materials from the context center or past conversations, and therein, lie dragons, where we see something and they're like, your AI didn't work, and we go like, really? Okay, like we start looking, we see where the information was pulled, either like historic data or a knowledge base, and we're like, well, here. So, oh, that's wrong. Okay, cool. What is it? Right? We fix it, problem goes away. So that's really what is mostly happening in terms of things not working, right? There are other things that are more dangerous hallucinations. I think a lot of the companies that are a bit more shallow from a machine learning perspective, that use LLMs to now hack up an agent for, typically it's like a small company, they raise a bit of money and build an agent for a specific use case, and then they kind of like polish it by changing the prompt to kind of like stop it from doing weird things, right? And if you polish it long enough for a single client, for a single use case, you can kind of do an okay job. But this is not robust software, right? It's not something that's like easily reusable. And the moment they've done it for like a second client and a third client and a fourth client, like enough things change, and they don't really, they can't keep track of what they've done and where, and then it gets really complicated, right? And you'll get examples of things like, you're booking a healthcare appointment, and the system goes like, do you have that time available tomorrow at 10 with Nicola? Yeah, I do. And you realize that it never made that call to check availability, and you're like, why? Well, because large language models are trained to simulate good conversations. A conversation where you have that time available is better than the one where you don't, right? So at that point, we go back into good old software engineering, where you have to build like hard controls over whether you can communicate that there's an appointment. Like then you build, in our case, Pythonic, but whatever, you build like software logic that says you cannot proceed to, send a text message with a confirmation until this API has been called and the answer is this. And that logic, you don't write a language, you don't leave it for the LLM to interpret. You build like a hard check, kind of like a nuclear switch, where it's like, it's code. It cannot be negotiated with. It's software. It's not intelligence, human or machine, right? And yeah, it's just checks and balances that you're really implementing in that system. So it can be done. It can be done really well. There is no need to fear hallucinations as this like completely misunderstood, randomly occurring thing. It's really just a matter of, like if you take a really sharp knife and you chop your finger off, like you chop your finger off, it's not the knife, right? And yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for covering that off, and I guess it's something to discuss, because normally it's like kind of discussed in a negative light. So it's quite good to kind of get that reassurance there, because but equally the last thing you want is 10 people turning up for a reservation for 2 at a restaurant that only seats a few people. But that's an interesting segue onto the demo that you guys have provided, because in this demo that I'll play shortly, it's all about a table reservation where a customer has an interaction with one of your AI agents. And yeah, so I'll play that video now for everybody, and then we can have a little bit of a chat afterwards.
Cafe Bridge Portsmouth, how can I help you today? Hi there. Can I book a table for 1:30 this coming Sunday for 4 people?
Let me just have a look at what space we have. Okay. We have a table on the 24th of July at 1:30 p.m. for 4 people. Is that all okay for you?
Yeah, that's great.
Great. Shall I go ahead and book that in for you?
Please do.
Can I have your full name, please?
Yep, my full name is Emily Schaefer.
Can you spell your last name for me?
Sure thing. It's Schaeffer. Schaefer.
Can we reach you on this number?
Yes, you can.
Perfect. I'm just waiting to see that go through. And that's done. Is there anything else that you need to let me know? Any allergies or other notes that I should make on your booking?
Yeah, someone in the group is celiac. Can you make a note of that, please?
We cater the dietary requirements, but all our food is prepared in the same kitchen. I'm just making a note on your booking now, but please remind someone from our team when you get here.
Yep, I can do that.
Is there anything else I can help you with?
I think that's everything. Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So yeah, so just the final question really off the back of that demo there. Thanks for sharing that with us. Is just how scalability comes in mind, and do you think that this is something where adoption will kind of take off massively, or do you think it'd be more gradual? Because obviously we spoke about verticals earlier, and different verticals that maybe implement them. Maybe restaurants will be earlier adopters compared to say the retail sector, healthcare sector. Do you see scalability as kind of like one thing coming up, or do you see it differently than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of it is just like tactical. It might change
Hmm.
like the scale of adoption by year, up or down in different verticals. Um, we see adoption everywhere. Like I think retail grew massively for us last year. Financial services did, healthcare did, utilities did, hospitality massively. Um, so yeah, like travel, pretty much everything is,
Mm.
and both places where healthcare, both kind of like industries where you have large centralized contact centers and those where you have like a massively distributed number of say locations that take phone calls and then maybe a lot of them miss those phone calls or send them over to a centralized contact center or they would like to but they can't really afford to set it up. So AI kind of like provides them a more cost effective way to just bring up a version of this very very quickly. So there's a massive amount of adoption um, all over the world, really. But the US is very dynamic. The UK is very strong as well. Continental Europe seems to be moving a bit more slowly, and I think that's just the cultural piece also around like different companies operating in different markets taking a bit of time to adapt to local circumstance. But like we see adoption everywhere, across verticals, across geographies.
Yeah, brilliant, and thank you for that. I think that's a good place to end on the optimism of the future there and scalability. I'm sure it will expand. So yeah, just like to thank you for your time today. Thanks for jumping on the call, and thank you for all of our listeners for joining us for another video. PolyAI is going to have a couple of articles coming out soon, so check out our website for those. You can also join all of our community groups. We've got LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Reddit. So yeah, I'll drop a link in the description below. But Nicola, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.